Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for tuning in to the latest in the Rowley Turpin webinars on things that affect our clients and people who might be clients, and all sorts of people who are interested in their lifelong financial planning. You'll see today's webinar is entitled Planning for a 100-Year Life, and some of you might sit there thinking, really, 100? Well, we'll see. As we go along, you might think it's more relevant than you might have thought before. Okay. So just a quick note at the beginning, the cameras at your end are turned off and so are the speakers, so you can just hear us. There's a Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen on Zoom, where you can put in questions that occur to you along the way, and we will answer them at the end. The caveat, of course, is always that this is a general information webinar. For specialist advice, for detailed and personal advice, please come to us. We'll be absolutely delighted to welcome you here. Just to do welcome and expectations, you just move that off the screen? Okay. This is purely educational. There's no product push here, although of course we will encourage you to come and speak to Rowley Turpin. No obligation, and it's designed just to help you in understanding what you need to think about next. So I said that this was planning for a 100-year life and why that matters now and why you might not think it relates to you, but the figure there, 16,600 people, it celebrated their 100th birthday in 2024. Now, that on its own might not mean much, but that's double the number from 2004, 20 years before. So, I don't know, if that goes on doubling, that means more and more and more and more people are going to hit 100, and that's what the statistics suggest to us. Now, we've just pulled out a couple of those people. So David Attenborough turned 100, and he marked that by presenting a new documentary. Now, I suppose not many of us are going to be fabulous and fantastic enough as he is and be able to do great work at age 100. But nevertheless, it's something to think about in terms of keeping busy and leading a good retirement rather than just middling along. And at the bottom, completely different character, Dick Van Dyke also reached 100, and he said he didn't want to retire. Working is his hobby. Now, you might not be a national treasure, you might not be a classic song and dance man, but nevertheless, as we're going to see in a minute, there's a good chance that of the people watching this webinar, and I can see those of you who are joined today, some of you will reach 100. There's no doubt about it. So as part of this, because this is so important to us in this planning for a long-term time horizon, we prepared a free guide, How to Plan for a 100-Year Life. It is a booklet here, and we can send this to you, or you can download it. There'll be a link in the chat box below where you can click on a link and get it for yourself. And that encompasses some of the things we're going to talk about today. The 10 things we'll cover today, just a bit of an advance warning. We're going to be talking about how longer lives are becoming more common. We're going to be thinking the traditional shape of retirement, not being one uniform, homogeneous span of years. Talking about the finances, the number, the enough number, as we call it. Talking about the importance of filling your time as well as your income. And the really key thing in today's webinar is talking about modelling your cash flow and not just guessing what the future is going to hold. Then halfway point, Scott is going to take over, and we're going to talk about protecting the first year's retirement. These are some of the key things you need to think about that factor into that shape of that retirement. The first few years, what you want to do the first years versus later. Planning for the possibility of care. Inflation is a really important one. Then we're going to talk a little bit about investments, not in any detail, but about the potential importance. And then we're going to talk about the legacy plan and regular reviews. So diving into that, just about longer lives becoming the norm, I explained about David Attenborough and Dick Van Dyke, and you might wonder how that applies to you. Well, the average age reached, this is a person who's 60-year-old now, so perhaps, about the same as some of you. A woman is going to live to 87 statistically, and a man to 85. So it's still that differential which we all know about. And that's fine, but okay, you need to think about the percentage chance of actually reaching a much older age. So 25% of you will actually, it's a 25% chance of reaching a much older age, 95 and 92. That's a lot more. And a 10% chance, so 1 in 10. There's a few people on this webinar who might fall into this. A 10% chance of reaching 99 and 97, just a wee bit short of that 100 figure. So this is to emphasize to you that this life expectancy, there's a really good chance that you might live a lot longer than that average. And of course, this is for people who are age 60 now. People who are youngsters now are in a different category, and they might very well live of over 100, on a regular basis. So what does this mean? Well, we think about the length of your retirement. It might be a lot longer than you think, but also it might not be one shape. You don't simply retire and that's the job, and you have a new retirement and you do the same thing forever. Normally it has a traditional shape. So between 50 and 60 pre-retirement, you're at the peak of your career, perhaps the children have gone, and you really pay attention to, okay, preparing for retirement. And that's typically the time we see really certain clients come to us to say, we need to get this on wheels, we need to get this sorted. Then 60 to 70, this will vary for people, of course, but the first period of retirement is the active retirement, what I call the golden years, when you're doing all the things you want to do. You're going on holiday, you're helping family, you're living your best possible life, free of the shackles of going into the office every day. Then there comes a point where you tend to slow down, 70 to 80 perhaps, although those of us who are healthy might make it much longer. Energy, priorities shift, and typically you might spend a little bit less, a lot of people. And then towards the end of the life, what we call later life, the legacy is when really your priorities are thinking about focusing on family, relationships, what you leave behind, all those kind of things. So this is not one shape, it's a changing shape over time. And for that reason, you can't just plan one strategy. There's a various multitude of them. But of course, we are talking about money, we are financial advisors, and so a lot of those priorities in your life, that shape, is going to be guided by having enough money to do the things you'd like to do, to live the life you'd like to live. So there's a couple of numbers here. The first one might seem quite low to a lot of people. This is, I think, the government guideline on the minimum that a single person needs to live a reasonable life in the UK, covering not a very rich life, I've got to say, and a week-long holiday once a year in the UK. The larger number, 44,000 almost, is for what they call a comfortable retirement. So a bit of overseas travel, a bit more spending money, all of those kind of things. So 43,900 is actually quite a lot of money, and that's not for a wealthy person, that's for comfort. So these are the numbers given out by the government, which might be meaningless for you, but it's tempting to start by thinking, okay, well, looking at these numbers, how much money do I need? How much do I need to accrue? Where do I need to get to? But a more useful starting point, and something we will help you do, is to say, well, what kind of life am I actually trying to create? What am I doing in that first, second, third, and fourth period? What do I see my life as being? And then working from there, what do I need to do? It's a much better way of doing it and allows for much better and more relaxed and more comfortable planning. So on that retirement, I said to you before that it's not just about money. We all know, and there's lots of things in the press, especially recently for some reason, about how retirement is not just a financial matter, it's a lifestyle matter. And the key things are always staying active, both for physical health and mental health, doing things that interest you, embracing your passions. And the really important thing is staying connected to social connection. A lot of us, when we leave work, lose a big social network. And all the evidence has shown that social connection is massively important, both for happiness, but also for physical health. It has an impact. So what you do in retirement is important. It's not simply you finish your job and then you've got no job. No, this is a new job. And it's possible to do a bad job of retiring. I'm afraid some people do. There's something on the left of the screen, the 21 boxes. Now, Scott, my colleague, thinks he might have invented this. We're not sure. But it's a nice way of visualizing your retirement. You've got 7 days of the week, morning, afternoon, and evening. How many of those boxes can you fill? Well, when you start thinking about it, it might actually be quite challenging, because I'm walking the dog, playing some golf, doing a bit of DIY. How many have I filled? Now, they don't have to be big tasks 3 times a day. They can be sitting reading a book or meeting family. They can be modest things. But people who plan that they have things to look forward to in their week tend to do a lot better and lead not only better retirements, but longer retirements. So some of the things I've just talked about is what I'm going to talk about next is working all this out. Okay, Martin, it's all very well saying my retirement takes a different shape and working out how much money I need. How do I do that? Well, there's a strategy that we use called financial modelling or cash flow modelling, there's a book that covers some of the key principles of this. This isn't a new idea to us. This is written by someone called Paul Armisen. We've given this book to several of our clients, and if you'd like a copy of this book, it's very easy to read, then we would love to give you a copy of it. Which sets out some of the broad principles of how to think about this modelling and this retirement. It doesn't give you your number, it doesn't tell you what you should do, but it gives you the themes, and those themes are something that we would take you through if you came to see us. So just moving on from that, modelling the cash flow, the key thing is, for goodness sake, don't guess it. The reason many people come to us to work out what happens in their time is because they think they're winging it, they think they're guessing it. A lot of them think, I know I'm probably okay, but they're also thinking, I'm not really sure. And so we will go through, we find out about you first, then we find out about your money, and then we put it together using computer software to plan out. And it can be quite sophisticated, very sophisticated in fact, but what you will see, the financial map, is very easy to understand. And one of the key charts, we extracted one of those today for you to look at. This is a financial bucket, or money that you've got available to you. Not money in and money out, which is a separate thing. This is how much wealth you have. This isn't including your house. This is money in pensions and ISAs and investments. Now you can see that over the time, this person is age 55 now, and it goes all the way up to 100. That's the age we've been talking about. You can see this person runs out in their 80s of money, which is not much good, really. Well, might be options of working longer, trying to earn more if they're still employed, or spending less, which is unwelcome, but possibility, or maybe investing more, getting better returns, or maybe saving tax. These are all the options that we speak about. And hopefully, you might look like this. This is someone who has quite a lot of money, and yes, it does go down, but to me, that means they're using their money well. They are using their money for the purpose they built it up for, which is to live a good life, but not running too short. In this case, I would say you're on track. You can relax. Peace of mind is what you have. You just need planning to keep on track. But then this person has lots of money. They're making more money than they're spending. Now, that might be because they're living the life they want to and don't need all that money. But for some people, paradoxically, I think this sometimes is a signal of a retirement badly planned. Look at all that money. They could have led perhaps a happier, richer life, perhaps helped family members or even charities. They're more money than they need, and perhaps they could have retired earlier. And those golden years could have been even better. They could increase their spending, or maybe just reduce investment risks. We don't need to be chasing for those returns. Or, as I said before, gifting money to family or good causes. That's a key thing we do with clients, showing them of your money, how much can you gift and when to children typically, without jeopardizing things, making sure you always have that safety net. So at that point, I've talked to you about the good, the bad, and the indifferent, and how your future might look and how we can help you model that. Now I'm going to hand over to Scott. He's going to go through a few factors that go into that and things that we will help you consider when we're looking at this planning. Scott.
Thank you very much, Martin. So Martin's gone through quite quickly the cash flow. Obviously, as part of that, we look at everything for you, income, expenditure, assets, and we do this modelling. Now, worth pointing out, these aren't, obviously, life is not a straight line, as we've talked about, and that these are only projections. We kind of take the midpoint. But if somebody's got too much, they're probably going to be fine no matter what. We model various issues that you might have. Maybe investment returns are worse, maybe they spend more, maybe they are healthier for longer, so therefore spend money for longer, and maybe there's market crashes, to make sure that their financial plans are resilient in any of those situations. And we do that for clients. Also, if somebody dies earlier than somebody else leaves a partner, or if you're ill, need long-term care, etc. So one of the first things that you might look at is whether you need to protect the first few years of retirement, or conversely, whether it's actually just enjoying the wealth that you've built up. So we've got an example here. Somebody's retired at 60, couple spending £48,000, which is reasonable, I'd say. For some people, that's not enough. Some people, it's too much. But of course, what they're forgetting at day one is, of course, yes, it's 48,000. They've got to fund themselves if they haven't got a defined benefit type pension. So it's out of savings, investments, and their own pension pots and other resources, business sale, etc. But from state pension age, and we assume for simplicity that the husband and wife are same ages, so they get state pension at the same time, they're going to get £24,000-25,000 gross in for a pension. So effectively, that's about half of what they actually need. So what they've got is they've got the years from 60 to state pension age, so probably 7 years where they've got quite a high draw on the pension pot. Then it's much less from state pension age onwards, but then it might get even less because, as we said before, about the 4 stages of retirement. Well, as people start to slow down and then head towards their legacy years, and as Mike said, those ages will vary for us all, and some of us sadly might not get to those ages, but it's likely that they're going to need even less for own resources, and maybe at some point the state pension alone, and certainly if you've got defined benefit pensions, might be more than sufficient. So there's an element of whether you need to, I suppose, protect the first few years of retirement, maybe you hold more cash, etc., to fund those on one hand, or the other side of it is, well, are we thinking about it in a slightly different way and saying that this is actually a prompt for us to enjoy the first few years of retirement, and we're quite happy to spend down some of our own resources because the longer term retirement planning position is so secure if we've got state pensions and defined benefit type pensions. Obviously, this varies dramatically from client to client, depends on what you age retire, what resources you have, what secure resources you have. You might factor into this similarly if you've got buy-to-let properties. The income isn't quite as secure as, say, the state pension, but it's pretty secure. And I'd say it's kind of dependable-ish, not secure. But again, you might bolt that in. So that might be this gold box, might not just be state pension. It might be your rental income and or defined pensions. So again, so it varies. So in this particular case, the client might want to spend a lot of his own resources in order to retire before state pension age, knowing that he needs less money when he's older because the state pension age covers some of that gap. Plan for the possibility of care. I put this as a question rather than a statement. I think a lot of people our side of the fence, and certainly on the investment side purely, have been guilty of overselling the care issue. It's clearly an issue, it's clearly expensive, and obviously most people are really worried about it. But there is a danger that we focus too much on the potential for needing care, which is typically something like 1 in 4 of us will need care. Average stay in a care home is something like 4 years. So it's an issue, but it doesn't affect everybody. But there's a danger we focus too much on the potential for care. And in order to kind of cover us to be in the nicest care home that we can for as long as possible, the trade-off for many people would be that we would have to work much, much longer, still saving and investing, paying into our pensions and not drawing down that money in order to build up a sufficient kind of reserve or battle fund in order to pay for those care fees in the future. And for me, I don't necessarily think that's a really great trade-off. If we have to work till 75, saving and investing forever in order to cover a potential care thing that may or may not happen, and for many of our clients would be covered by the resources anyway, yes, there might be less for the children to inherit, but it's fundamentally, most of our clients, it's not a case that they couldn't afford the care, then for me, that seems a bad trade-off. Obviously, it's not for me to make that decision for you as a client, but it's for me to kind of discuss that. That said, there are some things we can do. We can obviously look at what it's likely to be. There are things that you can do now proactively. You can look at your wills and whether they're structured to be as efficient as it could be for planning for care fees and other issues. Whether you've got lasting powers of attorney in place, again, all part of this kind of pre-planning. So again, the sooner you do that, the better. But I think you should be aware of care, and it is expensive. Yes, we will talk to you about it, but I wouldn't sacrifice my own retirement purely on the basis of being concerned about care. Inflation is the thing that, if anything that people might forget, inflation is probably one of those things. And certainly until the last few years, inflation kind of had disappeared in the UK because we had 10 years of very low interest rates, very low inflation. Prices didn't move too much, so people could have been forgiven for thinking that inflation had kind of gone away. We get into 2022, Liz Truss, not entirely her fault, then interest rates and inflation kind of come back with a vengeance kind of post-COVID. And they're kind of a sharp reminder that inflation is a thing. Even with the Bank of England's target 2%, it's still an impact. If we go back 20 years, we look at somebody retired in 2005. They needed an income, in their case, of say 35,000 a year, which would have been comfortable. I wouldn't say overly generous, but it would have been comfortable, typical with a lot of our clients probably at the time. Well, just because of inflation today, they would need around nearly 63,000. So had they retired in 2005, and we'll ignore state pension and things, just freeze, and say they'd had $750,000, actually probably wouldn't have worked actually. 2005, yeah, pre-interest rates come down, would have worked thinking about. They could have put that money in the bank. The interest would have given them 35, 40k a year, but after some tax, they were probably thinking they were golden. You fast forward to today, then even with rising interest rates a bit higher, that's not going to be enough to give you that £63,000, certainly when you take into account income tax. And of course, during that whole period, there was probably 10 years when interest rates were more like 1 or 2%. So what they might have thought was a safe cash approach might not be. In reality, they would have burnt through quite a lot of capital over this period. So with a longer and longer retirement period, potentially for some clients 30, 40, 50 years maybe, you just need to consider what is safe. And inflation, it means that cash isn't necessarily safe, because you certainly doesn't necessarily give you safety. And leading on to that, we need to reconsider now how your pensions are positioned and your investments. So again, the traditional approach generally reduce risk as you approach retirement age. And for some people that still works. Interest rates are higher, annuity rates are better. There is certainly an argument for that if you're going down the annuity route. If you're not going to go to the annuity route and you're not going to do that straight away, maybe you've got this period we mentioned earlier whereby your state pensions and or final salary defined benefit pensions haven't kicked in yet, and therefore you need to spend your pot quicker, then annuities don't necessarily work in that case. You want drawdown. Then maybe you need, depending on the exact numbers, maybe you need to take a more normal investment approach, or not reduce it as you get closer to retirement age. Because if you're going to be in drawdown for potentially 10, 15, 20, 30 years, then reducing the risk artificially, in a sense, just before you retire, only then to go into drawdown and presumably put the risk back up to balance to speculative, is kind of like slightly daft, really. I'm trying to think of a better word than daft. But obviously, this is all the things that we do for clients. That said, if you've got more than enough money, you don't like investment risk, and the numbers work, there is nothing wrong with having money in cash as long as you understand the inflation risk. Our job as financial advisors is to empower you to lead the life that you want to do. We're to give you the advice, and as long as you're not doing anything that jeopardizes your financial future, we will always support it, because our view is that the money is designed to work for you, not the other way around. Building a legacy plan and regular reviews. There's two sides to this. If you have children or don't have children, in simple terms, if you have children, most people are worried a little bit about legacy. There's some element that some people are quite happy to say, no, the kids have been provided for and we will spend it, and we perfectly support that argument. I'll come on to a 10-to-1 rule in a minute on that. Equally, if you don't have children, then that need for a legacy for most people is normally much less, and therefore they have a lot more freedom to perhaps retire earlier, perhaps spend more money because they're not worried about preserving inheritance. Not everybody does worry about preserving inheritance, but if I took 100 clients with children, a lot of them would be keen on preserving some inheritance and legacy for the children. So again, it skews the numbers. If you can spend all down the cash, or you want to leave the same amount or similar to the children, makes a difference. And as part of that, we go back to the cash flow to some extent, that if you've not got enough, then obviously we would be cautioning against giving money to kids. If we're just right, within reason, maybe you want to give some money, maybe you don't want to give it sooner, maybe you want to wait till later. If we've got too much, and especially if we've got inheritance tax concerns, then maybe you want to make that gifting sooner. Helps the kids whilst they're young enough to enjoy it and you're still here to see them get the benefit. Probably gives you an inheritance tax saving. So we work with you depending on your situation, what we want to do. Review regularly. Just some of the things I've mentioned now. 5 years ago, interest rates and inflation were very low. Interest rates are now back to, I suppose, historic norms, having 10 years disappeared, really. Inflation's back more to normal things, and that's just really in kind of a 5-year window. The world has completely changed. We have tax rules change all the time, investments go up and down, life changes, people get made redundant, children want money for a house or for a wedding, and all of those things. So financial planning works better on an ongoing process as opposed to one-off event. Mentioned earlier my golden 10-to-1 rules. Well, completely unscientific, but I think it works. What I say to clients is that for every 10 years it takes you to save up any money, as in mum and dad, the kids will spend it in a year. Not always the case, but it's, I think, more true that it's not. And that's not to say you can't help kids. We fully support that if it works for you and it works for them. What we just say is that our view is generally that you should be spending the money on yourself first, in my view. Not all clients agree with that, because you've earned it. So our view is, well, we look after you first, and the children is an accompaniment to that, or secondary to some extent. So kind of whistle-stop tour of the things that I think we need to be looking at as we're looking at a retirement age or a life of 100. Number one, longer lives are becoming the norm. That's quite clear. Latest ONS data has there, as the average is still a relatively low kind of mid to early 80s, but a lot more and more of us are going to be 90 or 100. I will caveat that in the sense that I don't believe our car alliance as a whole are average. They tend to be wealthier, they tend to be healthier, they tend to be better educated, and therefore they are likely to live longer than those averages. So I think you have to take those averages with a small pinch of salt and add a little bit extra for you being, our client fundamentally. We need to rethink the traditional shape of retirement. Traditional retirement planning or retirement was very short and expected that you spend the same, and then we're not here. I think it's more of a kind of either a decline. I joke about kids taking your car keys off you in your mid-80s with clients, or maybe a smile shape. So it declines and care kicks in and then becomes more expensive. We don't know what it will be, but we can plan for what it might be. Knowing your enough number, fundamentally what your lifestyle looks at retirement, which goes to the next stage of about filling your time as well as your income, the 21 boxes, because what your hobbies and your intentions in retirement are will obviously feed to what your lifestyle is. So if your hobbies are, I don't know, flying or having a yacht, that's probably a lot more expensive than if your hobby is being a National Trust member and walking a dog in the local woods. It's completely different. I say, you look at your 21 boxes, because also there's a thing about not retiring just because you've reached an age. It's about thinking what you're retiring to. We do, say, the 21 boxes. We have a thing called 5 C's, which is from a guy called Mitch Anthony. 5 C's: successful aging or retirement, which is connectivity, curiosity, challenge, creativity, and charity. And the idea is work fills a lot of those 5 C's, and you probably need some of those 5 C's in retirement, otherwise you get bored. Modeling the cash flow, as I say, we work out what you're going to do, what it looks like, and what it might cost. We need to model the cash flow so you don't run out of money fundamentally, but also that you don't go with too much. A lot of our clients, it's the other issue. They're either just right or they've got too much. And I spend half my day nagging people to spend money. Do we need to protect the first few years of retirement, or do we need to kind of fund the first few years? Depends on people's situations, but it's a thing to look at. I say plan for the possibility of care, but don't be obsessed about it, I think. Don't let inflation quietly erode your plan. All the cash flow planning that me and Martin does always factors in inflation. We generally work on 3%, which is more than the Bank of England's figure. However, the Bank of England struggles to hit its 2%. I think it's fair. I think 3% is a more conservative or cautious figure. Again, reconsider how your investments are positioned, or in a sense, perhaps don't reconsider, i.e. don't calm them down unnecessarily. But again, I do think as we're getting older, our actual risks tend to get slightly lower. So we do need to keep it under review and make sure you're generally comfortable. Because partly we're no longer working, so maybe we can't replace that money. So maybe that leads us to be a tad more conservative. But again, it goes into the financial planning about how much risk we need to take. And obviously building a legacy plan and regular reviews. What is the money for? You need what you want to enjoy yourself. And if you've got more than enough, we'd encourage you to spend more on yourself and enjoy it. But then equally, if we're not going to spend it all, then are we looking at next generation good causes, and are we helping them now in the future? There isn't a right answer as such. It depends what is right for you. As part of all this, I've kind of distilled almost 30 years of experience working with people on retirement and the fact that people living longer into a book that I've published, 50 Today, 100 Tomorrow. Included in there is ideas such as 21 boxes, this idea of Monday to Sunday, morning, afternoon, and evening, and when work fills a lot of those boxes, then you obviously need to fill them when you're retired. 4 stages of retirement that Martin mentioned. The 10-to-1 golden rule that said that the kids will spend it in a year. For every 10 years you take saving money, so why don't you buy the Ferrari or whatever instead of them? And what I call a save and invest or spend and enjoy lever, which was mentioned Martin earlier, is basically, I liken this to the signal boxes on the old railway stations. Apparently levers don't move much, but in my head they move quite a lot. So a lot of our clients are prudent and very financially responsible. So they are savers and investors by nature generally. So they have, for their whole working life, they have their lever mostly firmly pressed down towards save and invest. What I find is that they struggle then to move that lever from save invest to spend and enjoy. So we'll have clients in retirement who are still saving for a rainy day, as it were, even though they've got enough or more than enough. So one of the things I do is I encourage clients where they can and where it's beneficial to move that lever from save and invest on one side and to pull it into spend and enjoy. And it doesn't have to go all the way to the bottom and be reckless and blow the money, but I think there's an element that we've worked hard and we should be enjoying it. Just back the book. You can get a copy of the book. It is on Amazon if you want to buy it, but if you want a complimentary copy, if you either email me or Martin, and obviously we'll send you a copy. The reminder, the caveats, none of this is financial advice. I think you hopefully all know that. We could help you plan for a 100-year life, obviously. Speak to me or Martin, email us, ring us. There should be a booking link. I'm not sure it worked, but we will send it out to you by email after this meeting, which will give a booking link for me and Martin. So if you want a telephone call, Zoom meeting, or face-to-face meeting with me and Martin, then that's fine. I say they've got the book, which is available on Amazon, or we will send you a complimentary copy. Questions and answers. Martin, just see, hopefully we've got some questions. Let's have a quick look. Okay. I think with sound issues, we lost a couple of people, which is annoying, but unfortunate, because some people it's okay, so I'm not sure what's happened. We will try to rectify that for the future presentation. Hopefully our recording of this will be fine, and we will send that out to people, so hopefully people can watch it at their leisure. I suppose a question, how realistic is this living to 100? As I say, not all of us will do, but something like 10% of us will live to 100, I think, is a reasonable rough guess. And the issue isn't whether we ourselves live to 100 necessarily. It's just what the planning looks like if we could live to 100. So even if we die at 90, well, if we haven't planned for age 100, what does your financial planning look like when you're 88? Because if you've run it to say 90 as an alternative, which is still 25% chance-ish of reaching that point, you might be 88 and see your money running out and thinking, hang on, if I don't die within 2 years, I've run out of money. I would view that as rather extreme. Admittedly, if we plan for 100, you might still have the same risk at 100, but I think that's much less of a risk. And so I think it's sensible to kind of plan for this. And that's it. Thank you very much. As I say, we will send a copy of the slides, a copy of the presentation, which hopefully audio is better for people. And thank you everyone for bearing me. Anything to add, Martin?
Thank you very much, and we'll see you on the next webinar.